Right, so if we look at question 7, it says what's the area of a semicircle? Okay, so if the perimeter is given as 50 inches. Okay, so once again, identify what we're solving for. We want the area. So the area formula for a semicircle is 1/2 pi r squared. So that tells us now the piece of information we need to solve for is r. Okay, so let's take our perimeter formula, which again we can regenerate. You don't have to memorize this because we have our radius. The perimeter is twice the radius plus the portion of this arc length. Again, that arc length is m over 360 times c. Well, again, it's 1/2 of the circumference, which is 2 pi r. The halves cancel. So we get pi r. So it's not hard to regenerate that each time. You don't need to specifically memorize any formulas. Okay. But here, if we know that p is 50, 2r plus pi r, I had mentioned this earlier. When you're working with these numbers, you need to isolate your r, and how do you do that? Factor it out. So when we factor out an r from both of these terms, we're left with a 2 plus pi. And now we can isolate our r by dividing both sides by 2 plus pi. So we get r is equal to this quantity. Now, I can go ahead and just bring that right over here. My area is 1/2 pi times the whole quantity, 50 over 2 pi squared. And you simply calculate this through. Okay. So if you're doing it straight from 1/2 times pi times the quantity 50 over, now when you rewrite this, since you have multiple terms in the denominator, we do need to separate those. 2 plus pi. Close off the parentheses in our denominator, close off the parentheses for our whole fraction, take it to the power of 2. Okay, now, if I want this answer in decimal form, if you plan ahead, you can hit the diamond button, or you can put a decimal after the 2. And you get your area to be 148.5472, depending on how many decimals they want. And let me show you a common mistake that a lot of you guys make. Okay? Again, notice I wrote everything out on paper and then I calculated it all at once. A lot of you guys, you do your work right on your calculator as you go, which is fine. Okay? The one thing that I want you to be very careful of is the following. So let's say we are finding this radius. So 50 divided by the quantity 2 plus pi. And when you do that, you get this number. Okay? So let's say we wanted to just square that value. So we square it. And we get this number. Well, right now, it even looks more confusing. So let's say we want it in decimal form. Many of you, or most of you actually, if you wanted to put this in decimal form, you, after seeing it done like this, you'd hit green diamond and then enter. And it doesn't register that, what did I do wrong? Okay. Right. Keep in mind when you're working with that running total and using the answer in 1, it just means the answer from the previous display. So what I did in this step right here was I took this whole expression and I squared it again. So it wasn't just squaring this and getting the decimal value. I squared it and then squared it again. Okay. Be careful when you're working on the running total in your memory or in the calculator display, because if you work to shift something into decimal form, it's possible that you wind up just recalculating the same thing that you just did, and it'll screw up your final calculation. Okay? Now, for some of these, it's hard for you guys to kind of gauge. This doesn't make sense. This is too big. It shouldn't be this big. Okay, so just be really careful when you're working through it. If you have time on a problem, that you can go back and double check it. Okay? This was this has been very common this year as I've gone around and watched you guys use your calculators. So just be really careful with it. The remedy for that, so let's say here you got to this point. So you squared it, but then you think, well, I want this in a decimal form because I don't understand what this number means. if that's the case, easiest thing to do is just go up, highlight the number, pull it down, and now when you hit green diamond and enter, now that's the correct decimal value for it. Right? So then you could take that value, multiply it by pi, and then multiply that by 1/2, or in this case, you could divide by 2, and you get your answer confirmed. Okay? So just be really careful using the calculators.